Right, why don't you start off by telling me a wee bit? Do you want to get the
I think so.
first? Yeah.
There's nothing until you hit record. I was like,
It was all fine until it became real.
Yeah.
Right, why don't you tell me a little bit about Outsider Games?
Okay, so Outsider Games, myself and Scott Grandison formed Outsider Games about 4 or 5 years ago now. We started off sort of trying to get on that sort of mobile game craze, but came too late. We had some mobile games and they've been sort of okay. I think it's getting harder and harder to make your way in mobile, and we're sort of branching out into the wider gamesphere, and we're trying to head towards bigger games, sort of PC, hopefully console, and sort of working our way forwards from there.
Awesome. What about yourself and Scott? Why don't tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to form Outsider?
Well, my background is in comics mostly. Spent a few years. I've probably been in the comic industry for about 7 or 8 years now. Scott actually runs a podcast called Comic Book Outsiders, which has no official link, but I quite like the name. So part of the name, Outsider Games, was influenced by Comic Book Outsiders. And basically, it's a really good show. Scott has a really good presence, and he's one of the few comic podcasts that can sort of talk intelligently about comics. So we had asked him to come and host. I think it was at the Bristol or Birmingham Comic Con, say about 5 years ago, and he was sort of comparing the panel. We were launching the book at that event, and again was our own panel, and he's basically comparing and recording that panel for us. And sort of got talking. I was like, well, I've done some work, for some freelance work for games. I'd love to form my own company. But I can't code. He's like, well, I just started making some games, and I'm a sort of lifelong computer scientist and coder, but I can't draw very well. So I sort of like, we should team up, try and get some funding, that sort of thing. And then so I started off with it was just me and him making those games and then bringing on some freelance people. With any funding we got, sort of brought on some animators, some sound design guys, and then eventually it was sort of grew into sort of a 4-man full-time studio at the minute. So Wailing Heights is a musical adventure game. So you find yourself a washed-up musician that hasn't had a gig in about 20 years, and you're invited to do a gig finally in a town called Wailing Heights. But when you arrive, the town's actually full of vegan werewolves and hipster vampires and all these sort of modern takes on the old monsters. But you're stuck in immigration because humans aren't actually allowed in town, and it's a mix-up. So a sort of passerby tells you that this music has power in this town, and gives you something called the possession wheel. So you have to find a character that, and you find their name, something they love, something they hate, and allows you to take over the body. So you basically hop around town, jumping into werewolves, jumping into vampires, which lets you get into like areas that they normally can't get into, and try and find your way back to your body so you can get out of this creepy town called Wailing Heights.
So what came to the creation of Wailing Heights? What's behind it?
I was at one of those gaming conventions over in England, and I was on the flight back, and I thought, right, we're going to move into this sort of longer form narrative game. Where can we go? And obviously my background being in comics, very influenced by comic style and sort of these really cool comic characters. But I thought body hopping really good, means you can control different characters. How about making a murder mystery and zombies and cool things? And I brought this to, so Scott put his input, and I brought it to Kevin Beamers, who's the writer of Hector Bards of Carnage and Schrodinger's Cat and these really quirky, cool games. And he sort of went, yeah, it's a good premise, but there's nothing too new to it. How about it's a music? Because we says we'll have some clues through music, some clues through comics. And he's like, but the music part sounds the best part. Make it a musical adventure game. And we're like, okay, it sounds good. And then he brought in the Deadbeats and all these really cool characters, and every character now has their own song and their own sort of album going along with it. So really, Kevin brought it from murder mystery into this really quirky, crazy musical adventure game.
In terms of the game itself, like, you have a lot of experience as a comic book artist anyway. But what's it influenced the particular style that you're going for in Wailing Heights?
Well, I say my background's in comics, so I have my own style that's sort of been developing over the years, but also getting to know a lot of the sort of really famous artists, who are in comics, and so we've sort of been bringing them on board to help us develop the style. So I brought on people like Glenn Fabry, who's really well known for his Preacher covers, and he's drawn for Daredevil and Marvel and characters throughout the years. brought him on to design the ghosts and Soul Gilman and these different characters throughout the game. But we brought on John McFarlane, who's a local artist just coming up himself. But I thought he would be taking the style from me, but it's more and more, the more detail he puts in, the more detail I had to put in. I'm feeding off all these artists together to make something that's probably, I think, visually unique.
Yeah, so what was your reasoning behind doing the development blog, and how has it benefited you as a team?
Yeah, I mean, I think the game's a strong game, and I know we have really good artists that come on board, so I know that the game looks good, at least to me anyway, especially with these sort of really famous comic artists helping out. But the one thing we're sort of afraid of is releasing the game as an indie into the ether of silence. So that's sort of big work we had the whole year. So I made sure that we're always talking to people so that people will know about the game in terms of when we release, people will talk about it and play it. But also, I think almost as importantly, we're getting feedback from what we're setting out. Even for the main character, Francis, because Francis is really only in their own body at the start and the end of the game. So I thought, well, the voice recording isn't going to take much for him or her, which is what we sort of sent out and went, well, if Francis is only in there for 5 minutes, why not make it a sort of asexual character in shadow? But that was harder to do than we thought. We thought, a simple face means it can be a man or a woman, and then you can hop into anybody later. But it was really, so I sent out some sort of sketches of a shadowy face, and then so the community sort of went, no, it's definitely a man. It's like, oh, okay, and then changed a few things. Go, no, it's definitely a woman now. It's like, oh, so that's sort of feel. And then we finally got an example where people went, we're half of them, actually maybe a quarter went, it's definitely a man, half went, it's a quarter, definitely a woman, and a few in the middle went, yeah, it's ambiguous. So I'm happy with that. But that sort of feedback is really, really helpful for just for those sort of like finer points in the game. So,
what is your ultimate vision for Wailing Heights?
So the ultimate vision is to have a game out there that's being played by a large community. I'd love to do a sequel. We'll have ideas that already that just can't fit in this game because we don't have an unlimited budget. But also we'll have a really concise 3-act story, and you can't bring on all these ideas. But there's ideas there for a sequel. I would love to eventually make a sort of publishing brand of it and have our own. There's comics we're getting drawn by people to put into the game, but I'd love to expand that into comic series based on the more popular characters as we go along, and have just to be able to have something that get that hook from an audience, and so we can deliver more and more, and just keep make a franchise out of it. Just keep those characters. We now really love these characters now, so to keep them characters going for years would be really, really good.
Awesome. So early 2016.
Yeah. Yes. Early 2016, definitely. Yep. I have. Yeah.